Hello viewers and welcome to yet another live-action commentated match of Warhammer 40,000 Conquest. My name is Mitch and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today I'm pleased to present you with another video sent in courtesy of none other than Pejhmon Kamaie as well as Shirin. To the right we happen to have our initiative token in the hands of our Dark Eldar player. We see Urien Rakarth played by Pejhmon, and to the left we happen to have Shirin representing our Tyranids faction. She's taken up the reins of Old One-Eye, as well as the associated Synapse unit, the Venom Throat Polluter. We've already seen a fair few deploy actions, so in breaking those down now, we see the Crucible of Malediction in Pejhmon's HQ. It basically allows him the opportunity, upon playing a torture event, to take a look at the top 3 cards of Shirin's deck, pick one of those cards to be discarded, and put the remaining 2 on the bottom of her deck in the order he would like. He ended up discarding a copy of the Scything Hormagaunts, and he ended up playing a Rakarth's Experimentations in order to do that. It's a free event thanks to Urien's decrease the cost of all torture events by 1 ability, and it looks as though whatever card type he called out was not able to be discarded by Shirin, so Old One-Eye is sitting there with 1 point of damage. Similarly, Shirin has also put into play a support that's a copy of Brood Chamber in her HQ. She basically picks one of her army units, and she's able to copy any of the keywords on an opposing unit at that planet until the end of the phase, so any of her units could get Area Effect 1, Flying, Armorbane, Immune, Brutal, any of those different things. It's entirely dependent upon whatever your opponent plays. But looks as though we also see a copy of the signature support Urien's Oubliette put into place. That means that that means that just Shirin has to play with the top card of her deck revealed, and it gives 2 different options. We see that both players have to discard the top card of their deck. The other option is both players end up drawing a card. So dependent upon what exactly you see atop your opponent's deck, you can basically trigger that accordingly. So that's 2 copies of Scything Hormagaunt down for Old One-Eye, and if Shirin was relying on something like Shrieking Harpy or Hunter Gargoyles to help her out, that's going to be 2 valuable means of infesting planets gone. Siren Zithlex was discarded from our Urien player's deck, and considering that unique unit has 2 command icons and a fantastic ability of exhausting units that are deployed to its planet if they're of the enemy's faction, that's pretty incredible, but I can only imagine that Urien is going to be running multiple copies. But looks as though the economic presence is far stronger at the moment for Old One-Eye, but note that she has, I don't believe, any resource tokens left relative to Urien's 5. We see a Volatile Pyrovore sitting at planet number 1. That's a 3 attack, 3 hit point unit with 1 command icon. When it's destroyed by an attack, you deal 3 damage to the attacker, which is an incredibly powerful card effect. And sitting at planet number 2, we happen to have a Lurking Hormagaunt, which is a 3/1 with 1 command icon. It's Old One-Eye's signature army unit. When it's assigned damage, you can basically transfer any of that assigned damage instead to Old One-Eye. And of course, whenever he readies, you remove half of the damage tokens from him, rounded up. And I suppose to just keep going down the line there, we've also got a copy of the Termagant Sentry sitting at planet number 4, which is a 1/2 with 1 command icon for 1, and it readies when a Termagant token is destroyed at its planet. But considering this is Old One-Eye and not the Swarm Lord, there's no Gravid Tervagon to be found. I don't imagine that that's going to be readying much, but we do see a copy of the Prophetic Farseer played out to planet number 3. That's going to be one of our new Decree of Ruin Eldar cards. It's Psyker trait. It's basically a 2/4 with 1 command. It came into play, and seeing as how there was a Ferocious Strength, the signature event sitting atop Shirin's deck there, basically it just allows you to take a peek at the top 3 cards, discard any of those that happen to have shield values associated with them. So it looks as though it was a whiff apart from that Ferocious Strength, but getting rid of that signature event is incredibly useful, just because Old One-Eye, should he be able to be allowed to gain the Brutal keyword until the end of the combat round, since he's got 6 hit points, that could be an attack for 7. If he gets the Great Scything Talons and his pool of HP goes up to 7, that could be an attack of 8. If we see the Awakening Cavern, his signature support, that could be an attack of 7 or 8 twice, so it's just absolute madness. Urien himself is relatively squishy, and that's definitely a nice event to see gone. Plus, It definitely counts as shields. The Venom Throat Polluter, the way that works going into command, for your reference, is basically after its commit to a planet, you can pick and choose any army unit from the planet where your warlord is located to move it to the planet with the Venom Throat Polluter. So, for instance, we could see Old One-Eye go to planet number 1 if the Volatile Pyrovore is not needed at that planet based upon wherever Urien goes. Then the Volatile Pyrovore can be shifted down to a different planet. The Venom Throat Polluter can nicely reel it in, and the fewer units entering your HQ, the fewer units you have returning to play exhausted, and considering Old One-Eye is much more elite heavy than the Swarmlord, certainly you've got more beefier units as opposed to many weaker ones, so you'll want to get as many actions out of those as possible. So, looks as though our players are currently deciding where exactly to send their warlords. Looks as though somebody had forgotten their Tyranid-specific command dial there, but no worries. We see a copy of the Incubus Warrior having been put out to planet number 4, and that's going to be 2 command icons trumping the Termagant Sentries 1. So it's going to be very dangerous for Urien, despite his holding the command token, initiative token, I mean, to go to planet number 1 or planet number 2. Planet number 2, note, happens to be Iridial, which is the healing planet, but if Urien goes to that planet, he could potentially do something along the lines of Searing Brand to deal damage to that Lurking Hormigaunt, but any of it can be reassigned to Old One-Eye's planet. And that just, to Old One-Eye specifically, and that just poses a big problem for, Urien potentially getting beaten up and being unable to kill that Lurking Hormigaunt himself. But looks as though Old One-Eye goes to planet number 1, the Venom Throat Polluter reels in the Volatile Pyrovore from planet number 1 to planet number 2. Urien himself goes to planet number 3, which is Taurus, which he's going to be able to activate because his unit count is so low. But planet number 1 is going to be 1 card, 1 resource to the left for Old One-Eye. Planet number 2 is going to be 1 card for Old One-Eye. Planet number 3 is going to be 1 card, 1 resource for Urien. Planet number 4 is going to be 2 resources to Urien. So we're going to see combats at planet number 1 and planet number 3, although there are not any units to be destroyed by any of the present units. So, looks as though planet number 1 is going to be Karrnath, which affords Shirin the ability to activate any other planet in play. Iridial's an option to heal, because that's planet number 2. Planet number 3 is going to be Taurus, which, if you've got fewer units, you can generate 3 resources. You can win 3 cards. Totally up to you. Generally, cards are much more valuable, and I imagine that's what Urien is going to be grabbing. Planet number 4, by the way, is Ossus 4. It's the Steel 1 resource planet. Looks as though that was indeed the planet that was triggered, and kind of an odd layout of planets, because planet number 5 is Yavvarn, the planet which affords players the ability to put an army unit from their hand directly into their HQ. Kind of a nice little workaround for Klavex War Leader if you're playing against a dark Eldar player who has a real, dearth of cards in their hand. But looks as though the HQ phase comes and goes. Taurus was triggered. Looks as though it was cards that good Sir Pejhmon there drew, and that's going to be 4 resources, 2 cards for each player. The initiative token now goes to Old One-Eye, and Shirin is sitting on 1 red, 1 blue icon. Note that Urien's Oubliette means that Shirin always has to play with the top card of her deck revealed, and considering that command struggles are resolved 1 planet at a time, unless you're drawing multiple cards, say like a 2-card bonus planet, you draw both of those simultaneously, then it's entirely possible that Pejhmon is going to know each and every card that ends up entering his significant other's hand there. But planet number 1 is going to be heavily locked down by our Tyranid player. For all I know, she could keep doing the Venom Throat shuffle and moving some of those Tyranids further down the line. That Lurking Hormigaunt is a fantastic unit by itself to kill off the opposition, but then again, the Pyrovore is as well, even without regeneration or something like that. Archon's Terror is going to cost a total of 3 resources, played by Urien, so I think it's unlikely that we'll see that card. Urien is maybe foregoing victories at the first couple planets just to try to I suppose, preserve his forces, not overextend himself. But that's another copy of the zero-cost Rakarth's Experimentations. That's going to be the Crucible of Malediction Exhausted, and we're going to take a look at those 3 cards, a Ripper Swarm, Termagant Sentry, and a Virulent Spore Sacs. He gets to pick one to discard, whichever one he finds most offensive, dependent upon the game state and his mood. And then the other 2 go to the bottom of the deck in the order he would like. I'll be very curious to see how far into this game's development it's going to really start to matter, say, rearranging cards like that at the bottom of the deck. And I suppose I misspoke. They go to the top of the deck, so my apologies for misspeaking earlier, but we see a copy of the Toxic Venomthrope sitting at planet number 4, which could potentially infest that if it's left to win a command struggle at that planet. Only 1 resource on the line. Definitely not a very desirable target for Urien to go. Our new planet number 5 is going to be Shirin, which allows players to route a non-warlord unit. That is what I would call a desirable location for Urien, considering how clogged the first few planets are with powerful Tyranid units, considering basically, I would say whatever the Toxic Venomthrope ends up relocating between the Volatile Pyrovore and the Lurking Hormigaunt, I imagine that's what is going to end up being routed. Virulent Spore Sacs are sitting at planet number 2. That's another fantastic means of infesting planets. You basically blow it up, and it deals 1 point of not area effect damage to all extant present enemy units. And it puts an infestation token at that planet for you to use your Hunter Gargoyles, your drop pod, whatever it's called, spore burst. There we go. I was close. I was thinking mycetic spores. But anyways, lets you use that to recur a Tyranid from your discard pile, put that into play, and even though there's certainly a large number of cards being discarded into Shirin's discard pile, that could very well fuel a Spore Burst if Pejhmon ends up ditching something desirable like a Volatile Pyrovore. But let's see here. We've got a second copy of the Lurking Hormigaunt sitting on the Victory Condition planet, which is going to be Taurus, so our Tyranid looks like she's in just fantastic position to potentially win this game. Note that Old One-Eye has 2 points of damage from that Rakarth's Experimentations, but he's yet to have an opportunity to exhaust and remove any of that damage. We've got a Void Pirate sitting at planet number 5 for Urien. I believe that our Tyranid player has not passed quite yet. We see a promotion as likely her final action onto that Termagant Sentry, which means 3 command icons beats 2, and that's potentially going to be 2 resources for our Tyranid, unless Urien goes to that planet. Urien is going to want to send himself to Taurus, because if he can win a battle at that planet, he's going to be able to, trigger Taurus once again. But if the Venomthrope goes to Taurus, that could potentially be pretty dangerous if Old One-Eye goes to planet number 1, but I think Old One-Eye is more than likely going to want to go to... I guess if you wanted to be incredibly conservative, you could have Old One-Eye go to planet number 1, and you could have the Venomthrope Polluter go to planet number 2. And then you could use the Venomthrope Polluter to pull over. I would choose the Volatile Pyrovore. Or you could just have your Warlord go to planet number 2 as well, but that seems a little bit overkill. So certainly a ton of different options for Old One-Eye. He could even go to planet number 3 if he thinks that's where Urien's going to go. But I'm presuming planet number 5 for Urien, but let's see. Okay, no. I was wrong. I suppose Urien is going to end up going to planet number 2, and there we are. There's that Volatile Pyrovore. So Urien definitely wants to trigger Taurus, but I was just afraid that he would not be able to withstand the opposition there, but who knows? Maybe there's going to be all sorts of Searing Brand and all kinds of nastiness. Old One-Eye is going to win command, so that's 1 card for Shirin to the left. Watch her discard pile, or her deck, I suppose, as we're drawing cards. And planet number 2 is going to be 1 card, 1 resource for Urien. Planet number 3 is going to be 2 resources for Shirin. Planet number 4 is going to be 1 resource for Shirin, and she generated an infestation token on that planet, though that is incredibly difficult to see. And that is 2 resources and 1 card at planet number 5 there for Pejhmon. But Iridial is going to be 1. That means Old One-Eye clears himself of 2 points of damage, bounces back to his HQ. That Lurking Hormigaunt is sitting in the HQ, and the Venom Throat Polluter clearly pulled that Volatile Pyrovore over to Taurus. So now what exactly can we see from Urien to try to contest this? There we go, there's 1 copy of Searing Brand. So for 2 resources, 3 unpreventable damage unless you choose and discard 2 cards. So let's see it. Are you going to discard 2 cards? Shirin looks as though she has 3, maybe 4 cards in hand. She's got to be really torn between, do I want to discard these cards or not? And something in my gut tells me that there's going to be a follow-up Searing Brand to contest that, but let's see. So she's going to discard 2 cards. 1 looks like a copy of Predation, and there we go. That's going to be a 2nd copy of Searing Brand. So Urien had to have something in his hand. Were he ballsy enough to go to that planet? Looks as though that's going to be 2 Searing Brands there. So that is an event killing the Volatile Pyrovore. That means its reaction, because it was not destroyed by an attack, does not trigger, and that definitely makes things look a little bit more favorable there for Urien. So the Virulent Spore Sac is going to be exploded. It's going to be 1 point of damage to each of those units. We should be seeing an infestation on that planet, but I suppose, you know, maybe at some point they'll remember it. But it's Urien with the initiative. He's going to be taking a swing of 2 against the Venom Throat Polluter there, and there's only 1 card remaining in Shirin's hands. So that's going to be that 1/4 unit with already 2 points of damage. The Bealtan Warp Spiders is only going to be able to attack for 1. Urien himself is only going to be able to attack for 2, but that's going to be more than enough to kill that Venom Throat Polluter, and I wonder what exactly Shirin has left in her hand in regard to shields. We see the Lurking Hormigaunt take a swing for 3, and what exactly is it going to be attacking? It's going to be taking a swing at Urien. He's already at 4 points of damage, and note that Iridial has been cleared from the field. That is the Venom Throat Polluter dead. That is a dangerous, crippling blow there, so that really hurts our Tyranid player, having lost the Synapse unit. There is no fallback played. Looks as though the Bealtan Warp Spiders take a swing. That damage is reassigned to Old One-Eye. Bealtan Warp Spiders means that Pejhmon gets to take a look at the top 2 cards of Shirin's deck, discard one of those cards, and put the remaining one back on top, which is a Ripper Swarm. So much information being afforded to Urien there thanks to the Oubliette, and we'll have to, pay rapt attention to whether or not the Oubliette ends up being used. So it looks as though another combat round occurs. That's going to be the Bealtan Warp Spiders taking another swing. That's a copy of Ripper Swarm discarded. Power from Pain is discarded as shields. That means that the Prophetic Farseer only takes 2 points of damage. It's going to take a swing of 2, and that's going to be 2 points of damage onto Old One-Eye there. So Old One-Eye himself only has 2 hit points remaining, and things are looking pretty grim for that Lurking Hormigaunt. Looks as though Urien decided to retreat at the end of the first combat round, and now it's going to be totally up to our Tyranid player. Does she want to retreat or not? She's the one with initiative, and she indeed does decide to retreat. And that means Taurus is going to be won by our Dark Eldar players. So currently our Dark Eldar player has 4 units in total relative to the 4 units controlled by our Tyranid. So Taurus's ability is a wash, but nevertheless a fantastic block. And now Urien is set up quite nicely to deny that early game victory there by Old One-Eye. So Old One-Eye is sitting at 2 HP, Urien sitting at 2 HP. Both of our players have drawn 2 cards. They've both drawn 4 resources from the token bank. We see that Urien's Oubliette, I suppose last turn maybe it was not exhausted to use its ability. A bit of a damn shame there, but the Awakening Cavern, the signature support there for Old One-Eye, is sitting atop Shirin's deck. We see a Rakarth's Experimentations, I believe, played. That's going to be calling out a card type, and if you can discard a card of that type, then your Warlord does not take 1 point of damage. Otherwise, the Warlord is dealt 1 damage, and you could, say, shield against it. So generally, what is it? I think it's best to call attachment, because if your opponent wants to negate that damage, they have to discard an attachment or an event. And there we go. We actually see attachment called out, or she discarded it as shields. But that's basically that. And then we see, looks like the Crucible of Malediction there is going to grant the opportunity for a regeneration to be discarded, and that's a Tyranid Warrior put back atop the deck, as well as the Awakening Cavern remaining on the absolute top. So Shirin is very much, well, I was going to say she's the lack of resources, and that's not true. She's got far fewer, say, cards than resources. There's a lot of expensive stuff coming off the top of her deck in the near future, but all the same, I'm not sure if it's going to be enough. You know, a few strong units, investing a lot of resources in those may not work out if Urien can kind of, chip away at you to kill you through that respect. But Urien's Oubliette is, of course, exhausted. That's going to be the Awakening Cavern discarded. For Urien ditched a second useless copy of the Crucible of Malediction. I actually don't recall if that is unique or not, so maybe I'm being a little premature in calling it useless, but I don't seem to recall players having multiple copies of those in play ever. But we're still in our deploy phase. It looks as though 6 resource tokens there to the right for Pejhmon, and something like 7 resources for Shirin. She's only got 1 card in hand, and I'm kind of afraid that as soon as she has to end up passing, that's going to be another opportunity for Urien to maybe fill the board with economy units. Okay, so that's something pretty damn decent to see. That's a Shrieking Harpy. Note that Taurus should be infested at the moment. Granted, the initiative token does happen to be in the hands of Pejhmon, but a Shrieking Harpy being able to attack at an infested planet, and as a 2/5 flyer, at an infested planet, you exhaust all token and army units that are present. So it could have been possible that Old One-Eye could have commit to Taurus alongside that Shrieking Harpy and whatever else, and potentially won this one for her. So we'll have to see how combat ends up breaking down. But, of course, Warlock Destructor put out to Taurus makes things much more difficult for our Tyranid, because that attack value of 3 against a flyer does still end up being 2 points of damage, and clearly Shirin is not holding much in regard to shielding, which is a little bit hyperbolic on my part. She's clearly holding nothing. So all of those little points of chip damage could definitely add up over time. Urien will basically have free reign to go wherever he would like, but he's definitely going to want to try to block off his opponent's victory condition. So what are we going to see in regard to how those remaining 4 resource tokens are spent for our Dark Eldar player? Another copy of Biel-Tan Warp Spiders, I suppose, is a start. Very interesting choice to put that at Ossus 4, though I suppose he wants to block off as many... Well, I guess that's got to be I don't really know, I suppose, what the thought process is by putting that at that planet. Like, I was thinking he'd want to block off his opponent's victory condition, but apparently Shirin only has 1 green strongpoint icon, so Ossus 4 is essentially irrelevant. It's really difficult to trump 5 command icons when you've got, 2 there, and you play another 1 command unit. So I'm not sure what that was about, but Urien looks like goes to planet number 5, Barless, the random card discard planet. Old One-Eye is going to go to planet number 3, which is Yvarn. So planet number 1 is going to be 1 card, 1 resource to the right for Pejhmon. Planet number 2 is going to be 2 resources to the left for Old One-Eye. Planet number 3 is 1 resource and whatever the Toxic Venomthropes bonus was for Shirin. And looks as though planet number 4 is going to be 2 resources, 1 card there for Pejhmon, as well as planet number 5 is going to be 2 resources for Pejhmon. So in running through unit count really quick, that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units for Dark Eldar, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for our Tyranid, 7 counting Old One-Eye. So I suppose in hindsight, had we not seen that Biel-Tan Warp Spiders played, if my on-the-fly math was not wrong, that could have been Taurus triggered, and I think 3 additional cards or resources would have been much more valuable than that unit sitting there and doing nothing. But, oh well. Certainly, it looks as though Urien Rakarth is going to be able to nicely trump the command of Barless there, and it looks as though Old One-Eye actually triggers Yvarn, so interesting choice, but that's going to be the Slith Mercenary put into play by Pejhmon, and that's a copy of the Tyranid Warrior put into play by our Tyranid, so pretty interesting, but she's at least able to get a pretty decent cost unit out of it. We're going to see battle there at planet number 5, and that's Urien killing off that lowly Ripper Swarm. But we're going to see a new HQ phase. Our initiative token is going to change hands to Shirin. Looks as though we've got one green strong point icon for Urien, and perhaps Urien, trying to contest Ossus 4, is trying to act in the interest of his own battle ability as opposed to, act in the interest of fulfilling his own victory condition instead of strictly blocking that of his opponent. But both players got 2 cards. They drew 4 resources. Looks as though the top card of Shirin's deck is going to be a Tyranid Warrior. I've not really managed to keep up with that too closely over the course of this video, but certainly just a tremendous number of units that are sitting in Urien's HQ. Therefore, Urien is going to want to go to planet number 2 to potentially drop off all these units. But holy mother of hell, that's a second copy of Shrieking Harpy we see put out to Yavvarn, or perhaps we don't. So at one point there was maybe the threat of that happening, but perhaps it was taken back for some reason. So I was going to say a Shrieking Harpy sitting there at planet number 2 would be fantastic, because that would lock down a victory condition for Shirin. It'd be sitting at an infested planet, but perhaps our players were moving a little bit too quickly. Perhaps there was an action window lost. But what exactly are we going to see there? It looks like a copy of Warlock Destructor that was confined and relegated to Pejhmon's HQ ended up being destroyed. Okay, there we go. So, not sure what the confusion was there, but that's going to be a copy of the Shrieking Harpy put out to planet number 2. Like I was saying, Urien's victory condition is Yavvarn. Shirin's victory condition is also Yavvarn, and that means both of our players are going to be desperately in want of that planet. And between that Harpy, between the Hormagaunts, that is incredibly daunting opposition for our Dark Eldar player to try to best. But we see a copy of Visions of Agony Plaids. That's going to be basically taking a peek at your opponent's hand, picking one of those cards to be discarded. I happen to miss what that discard was. And then, of course, once again, we see Crucible of Malediction discarded. I can't quite tell what that is in the discard pile there. It almost looked like a burrowing Trigon, judging from that giant scything talon, but it was the wrong orientation to be the great scything talons based on artwork, unless I was misinterpreting the visual stimuli there. But we also see Urien's Oubliette triggered, and that is going to be looks as though a Tyranid Warrior discarded, and now the top card of Shirin's deck is looking to be a Predation, I believe. So what exactly is there yet to see? We're going to have combat occur. Urien is definitely, Urien is going to want to go to, I suppose, either planet number 1 or planet number 2. I suppose Urien is going to want to avoid combat at planet number 2 for as long as possible, so I imagine Urien will go to planet number 1 and then return to planet number 2 the following round, hopefully with more army units sitting at that planet not exhausted. And then perhaps Urien will have maybe something along the lines of a lone copy of Archon's Terror in his deck, or something like that to conveniently deal with the Shrieking Harpy. Something like a Searing Brand is definitely very convenient. 3 unpreventable damage to a flying unit certainly circumvents any kind of mitigation because of that keyword. And note that the Brood Chamber sitting there in Shirin's HQ has done a whole hell of a lot of nothing over the course of this game. Dark Eldar and Eldar aren't necessarily the most keyword-laden of units, especially this Urien deck here. So we see a copy of Promotion put out to the Bealtan Warp Spiders sitting at planet number 1. That's going to be a whopping total of 5 command icons, which breaks even with 5 command icons, but Urien is most likely going to be showing up at that planet, I can only imagine. So he's going to be at risk of being bloodied by the Shrieking Harpy, but what are we going to see? Old One Eye, I can only imagine, is going to be commit to planet number 2 to try to drop off that Tyranid Warrior, or we could also see Old One Eye go to planet number 1 and I suppose go there. So I guess if I were Old One Eye, I would it would be a really difficult decision for me. I would be sorely tempted to go to Ossus 4, but let's see how things break down. Urien does decide to go to planet number 1. Old One Eye is going to go the conservative route, go to planet number 2. No cards in Shirin's hand, so I don't see her triggering Yvarn, and that's going to be at planet number 1, 2 resources generated by Urien. Planet number 2 is going to be 1 resource plus the Venom Throat for Shirin. Planet number 3 is going to be 2 resources, 1 card for Pejhmon, and planet number 4 is going to be 2 cards for Pejhmon. So Shirin does presently have 1 card in hand. I can only imagine that is what the Venom Throat got her. We can see atop of her deck there, that looks like a second copy of Ferocious Strength that she'll draw during her HQ phase, and that could definitely make a tremendous bit of difference considering that Old One-Eye is currently sitting with 4 damage tokens on him. But looks as though we saw a unit take a swing. I'm not exactly sure what that was, and what a complete nightmare. That is a Klavex War Leader played out, and that means the Shrieking Harpy is automatically destroyed, so no reason to bother with Archon's Terror when you've got a Klavex War Leader. How silly do I feel to have not thought of the existence of that unit? Clearly someone has not been playing enough games, and I am of course referring to myself. So Klavex War Leader splashes down. Not only does it cost 4, but it immediately kills a 5 resource cost unit. We see a Bealtan Warp Spiders take a swing at that Termagant Sentry, and that's going to be fantastic fodder considering both of those Bealtans to potentially generate some additional card discards. There we go. Looks as though that card earlier that I thought was the Burrowing Trigon was actually just a copy of the Lurking Hormigaunt that has, of course, its dramatic Scything Talon sticking out there. So, at the end of the combat round, that's Urien retreating. That's the Termagant Sentry, which ends up being destroyed. I suppose maybe if that was the end of the combat round, then it would have been better to retreat with the Sentry, but so whether Urien used a combat action to retreat or not, I'm not quite certain, but we see another HQ phase. That's going to be 2 cards, 4 resources for both of our players. Just because I suppose they skipped the battle at Yvarn. It would have done no good for the Tyranid player to trigger that effect since she had no cards in hand, and now we just need to see how this kind of final battle plays out. So that's going to be, I suppose, if Urien won at Ossus 4, that would have been 1 resource stolen. Urien is sitting on the initiative token there, but it is going to be one hell of an uphill battle for him to try to fight through all of these different Tyranids here. So certainly Urien has a tremendous number of shield cards a tremendous number of resource tokens on the table, an enormous wealth of resources in hand. So is he going to have more Klavex War Leaders to deal with that Shrieking Harpy? What exactly is Urien going to see? That is a grand total of 10 resource tokens, which is incredibly nasty for Shirin's sake. Oh my god. As the first deploy phase, we see a copy of Siren Zithlex put out to planet number 1. That means any Tyranid units subsequently deployed to that planet, interplay exhausted, and let me tell you, that completely sucks. Because if she'd have had anything in hand, it would have been showing up exhausted, which is just a complete nightmare. And to make matters still worse, that's going to be a copy of the Warlock Destructor put out to planet number 1 for Pejhmon. We do see a copy of the Toxic Venom Throat put out to planet number 3 to potentially earn a couple cards for Shirin, but to her dismay, I'm certain we see Incubus Warrior matching that command, and of course that Void Pirate means that command is trumped. I see 1 resource token remaining for our Tyranid, and that means she's not going to have enough to play even a Dark Cunning, because that costs 2, and then you recur 1 resource, or, recover 1 resource, whatever, if you play it at an infested planet. And if you don't have enough to afford that event in the first place, then that does you absolutely no good. And we see another copy of the Warlock Destructor put out to planet number 2. What exactly are we going to see? Of course, we see both of our players sent to planet number 1. So if any warlords are bloodied at this point, that really doesn't matter too much, just because neither of them can be destroyed during this last combat of the game here. So if Shirin wins this combat, that's going to be a blue technology icon and she wins. If Urien wins this planet, that's going to be a green strong point icon and he wins. But planet number 1, it's looking as though that is going to be 1 resource for our Tyranid. Planet number 2 is going to be 2 cards and 1 resource to the right for our Dark Eldar player, and planet number 3 is going to be 3 cards for the Dark Eldar player, and he's sitting on 4 resources, so that is incredibly dangerous, incredibly daunting. The Warlock Destructor takes a swing. It's cut in half to 1.5, rounded up to 2, so unless we see a 2 shield icon value card discarded, that's going to be 1 point of damage at least dealt out to the Shrieking Harpy, and if we see that Clavex Warleader, then that is going to be brutal, and Pejhmon is looking through his hand, and there it is. That is a Clavex Warleader. That means that that unit is destroyed prior to its opportunity to attack and exhaust Siren Zithlex and the spare Warlock Destructor, so that is a painful blow to our Tyranid, and all of a sudden things are looking utterly insurmountable for Shirin. But what are we going to see? She's got 2 different 3-value attackers. Old One-Eye is incredibly wounded, but once he's bloodied, he can still continue being assigned damage from these lurking Hormagaunts, so they can definitely stay in the fight. Our Dark Eldar player is now entirely out of resources, so unless he comes across another copy of... I think he's still got at least 1 copy of Rakarth's Experimentations kicking around, so if our Tyranid player has, say... had Old One-Eye bloodied, if Old One-Eye is sitting at 1 hit point remaining, a Rakarth's Experimentations could seal the deal, in regard to an assassination victory regardless. But let's see how things are going to break down. I believe it is still Shirin's opportunity to attack. She's got a lot of valuable attackers, but she's got a lot of HP to chew through. What exactly is she going to do? We've still got that Crucible of Malediction that at this point isn't going to be doing any good whatsoever. The Tyranid player has no means of drawing additional cards mid-combat. That's going to be a copy of Ferocious Strength played, so that means that Old One-Eye is going to be able to attack for 6 until the remainder of the combat round, and there are now enough resources that Dark Cunning could be played, but that cannot target your Warlord, so why do I even bother mentioning it? That's going to be the Warlock Destructor outright obliterated. And there we go, that's going to be the Clavex Warleader that's taking a swing at that lurking Hormagaunt. So is the Hormagaunt going to die? Are we going to see Old One-Eye basically bloodied? Is he going to take that blow? At this point, I don't think there's really anything Shirin can do, but unless she has some means of readying Old One-Eye, I think personally I would just reassign all of that damage to my Warlord and let him be bloodied. I believe you can reassign all of that damage because it's conventional damage. She does use 1 shield card, but I would have to read the text of Lurking Hormagaunt to see if it says something like you can only assign the damage up to and not excluding the total amount of hit points your Warlord has remaining. So I think that Predation shield discard may have been unnecessary, but looks as though the Lurking Hormagaunt takes a swing at Siren Zithlex. We see something discarded. I believe that was a copy of Promotion discarded as shields. It's 2 points of damage onto the Siren herself. Old One-Eye is, of course, bloodied, but he's still got something like at least 5 hit points remaining to act as a reservoir to take damage for our Tyranids. The Tyranid Warrior there is going to take a swing. Well, it's going to take 2 points of damage, and it's going to take a swing for 2 at Urien. Urien negates one of those points of damage thanks to a power from Pain, so he's still at 1 hit point remaining. Our Lurking Hormagaunt is going to take a swing, but what exactly is it going to be attacking? It's a value of 3 outgoing against the Clavex Warleader. Okay, that's going to be the Clavex Warleader destroyed, but what else? What else are we going to see? The Toxic Venomthrope is taking a swing for an almighty 0, and that's going to bring us to the end of the combat round. All of these units are going to ready. No reason to send Urien home quite yet. I believe he's still sitting at the planet. Yep, there we go. And there's that Clavex Warleader. The Slith Mercenaries actually ends up being purchased by Shirin, so very wise play there. I kind of forgot that that unit existed. Everything was kind of bleeding into our Dark Eldar player's HQ there, but the Clavex Warleader takes a swing at that Lurking Hormagaunts. It ends up being destroyed, but in my opinion, that damage would have been better sent onto Old One-Eye just to preserve as many attackers as possible. Because Old One-Eye could have at least suffered 3 points of damage, and then whether or not it would have made a big difference, it's just always good to be quite aware of one's options. But that Lurking Hormigaunt is killed. Lurking Hormigaunt B takes a swing. Siren Zithlex is sent back to the hell where she belongs. And Slanesh, of course, claims her soul. But that's going to be the Prophetic Fossier taking a swing at the Slith Mercenary. The Slith Mercenary is outright killed. Our Tyranid's going to swing for 0 because of the Toxic Venom Thrope. That's going to be Urien killing off the copy there of that Toxic Venom Thrope. The Lurking Hormigaunts are killed, so a little bit of damage reassignment would have indeed been possible, but nevertheless, our players call out good games, so spectacularly well played by both of our players. Incredible how Clavex Warleader definitely does not shy away from dropping into play and outright obliterating those Shrieking Harpies, so our Tyranid players' wildest hopes and dreams utterly dashed. And, man, Clavex Warleader is one hell of a card, so Archon's Terror entirely unnecessary, but very well played, and of course, congratulations to Pejhmon. Always nice to see Urien getting a bit of a workout. Very interesting milling-type deck that Urien is playing. Definitely seems to pay off to forego the first couple planets to postpone that victory as long as possible, if possible. But I suppose I'll just end this video by saying, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already, or if you are already subscribed, as ever, you're always encouraged to share this content, as the more likes, the more views these videos receive, the more eyes there are on this game, the more players there are that may potentially join our community, end up falling in love with Conquest, and with us, end up sending the message to Fantasy Flight Games to continue to support this fantastic product. If at any point you'd like to get in touch with me, I would encourage you to do so through Twitter or on Facebook, and if you ever feel so inclined to help support the Hive Tyrant, perhaps to donate $1 or $2 on a strictly monthly basis to my cause, I would be honored were you to contribute to my Patreon. But once again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, be sure to check back in again soon for ever more Conquest LCG content to come.